This presentation will discuss two legal research projects and contrast the methodologies adopted, identifying the benefits for water resilience researchers of adopting a socio-legal approach to research. I will argue that the benefits of embracing socio-legal approaches can be twofold. Not only can such approaches open up consideration of legal problems to a wider base of researchers and audience, but they also facilitate a recognition of the important role that law plays in shaping society, both in general and in how we think about and use water. Law is increasingly recognised as playing a crucial role in the fostering of resilience in social ecological systems. Sometimes this role is viewed in a negative light, with law being described as impinging upon the capacity of societies to manage ecosystems, withstand environmental degradation, and rebuild and renew themselves afterwards. Yet it is also recognised that the law and legal system have the ability to promote resilient governance and management. However, if this positive view of the role of law is to come to fruition, and resilience researchers are to engage with the law as one of the factors that affect society's capacity to engage with change, then the key first step for such researchers is to identify the law and understand its role in the processes being studied. Through the exploration of two case studies on legal research topics relating to water, this presentation aims to explain the legal research methods available to such researchers and identify the benefits in water resilience topics of adopting a socio-legal approach. In response to severe flooding in the Somerset Levels in early 2014, then Prime Minister David Cameron stated that money was no object in the relief effort. Whatever money is needed for it will be spent. The question raised by this statement, for legal researchers at least, is whether the action taken by the government in response to the flooding of the Somerset Levels was motivated by the legal rights of those living and working in the area, or by political considerations. And so, as an interesting sideline to my main research interest, I embarked on an investigation of the law relating to flooding defence, to see if we have a legal right to be defended from flooding. The research adopted a doctrinal approach, which is the traditional legal research methodology. The essence of such an approach is that the law is a distinct field of study that can be separated from all outside influences. Furthermore, the crucial assumption for this approach is that the legal system is largely coherent, and so it is the role of the doctrinal researcher to uncover and explain this coherence. The consequence of viewing the legal system as discrete and distinct is that the sources available to the doctrinal researcher are for the most part limited to primary sources of law, so statute law and case law. The criticism of this approach, though, is obvious. This is law without any context, and so conclusions can lack recognition of the purpose the law was intended to serve, the context it was drawn up in, and the effects it has in practice. The doctrinal research carried out for this project covered a diverse array of topics, drawing on both statutory law and common law. Statutory law was notable for the lack of legally binding duties placed upon public bodies in relation to flood defences. Some of the common law options considered, including riparian rights, nuisance and negligence, did provide a small glimmer of hope to those benefiting from private flood defences. However, none of these provide the basis for a duty to keep flood defences in repair, and furthermore none are likely to extend to publicly owned flood defences. The conclusion from the research was therefore that no general right to all to be protected from flooding exists at present in the English and Welsh legal system. And so the response of the government in 2014 was motivated entirely by political considerations. This conclusion prompts concern for the difficult decisions to be made in the future as we move towards a world in which increasing numbers of the UK population will face flooding damage and disruption, so that money is no object will no longer be appropriate. In terms of lessons resilience researchers could take from this case study, the conclusions of the research project can be helpful in a number of ways. For example, the project drew together the law on private flood defences to provide guidance for those whose property is protected by such defences as to when and how they might be able to enforce the repair and maintenance of them. However, as a piece of doctrinal research, the conclusions are limited by the inability to look beyond the legal system. Despite the lack of a right to be defended from flooding, the government, no doubt motivated by political and economic considerations, powered into action in the wake of recent floods caused by Storm Ciara and Storm Dennis in early 2020, offering a package of measures to flood-hit areas, including grants to affected households and businesses to improve their resilience to future flooding. The inability of doctrinal research to consider the social context of the law being studied means that these motivations cannot be studied, and suggestions for how they might play out in the future cannot be made. Moving on to case study 2. This focused on the use of fishery resources and how to move towards more sustainable use of these resources. The public right to fish, also referred to as the public fishery, exists in English and Welsh common law and provides the right for all members of the public to fish in the sea and tidal waters, providing that any applicable legal rules and regulations are complied with. As part of my doctoral research, I conducted a case study of the district covered by the Devon and Severn Inshore Fisheries and Conservation Authority, the IFCA. This is the body responsible for the management of fisheries in coastal and tidal waters. The purpose of this research was to identify how people involved in fishing in this district understood and experienced the public right to fish. What did they think about it? And how such views and experiences impacted upon the management of coastal fisheries. In other words, what is the role of the public right to fish in fisheries management? In contrast with case study 1, for this research I was looking to travel far outside the confines of the doctrinal legal system and focus heavily on the social understanding of the law, and so I adopted a socio-legal approach. This type of approach involves viewing the legal system as a social institution and taking account of the social effects of law, legal processes, institutions and services, together with the influence of social, political and economic factors on the law and legal institutions. The research therefore involved semi-structured interviews with 26 participants drawn from the commercial fishing sector, recreational fishing, conservation and those involved in the management of fisheries. It also drew on data published by the IFCA and my observations of the public meetings held by the IFCA Management Committee during the period of data collection. The data collected in this case study was analysed using a reflexive thematic analysis that resulted in the generation of 5 themes telling the story of the data. These themes and their relationships are shown in the thematic map on the slide. Unlike the suggestions in the literature that the public right to fish provides a licence to commercial fishermen to overfish, the story of the data is one of a public right to fish that performs a valuable role in fisheries and society by acknowledging and protecting the public interest in the fishery resource. The public right to fish is also a legal instrument that, if embraced, could help to reach the balance that was recognised by many of the participants to be the target of fisheries management. This aim could be achieved through framing the public fishery as a public trust asset. The public trust is a legal doctrine providing that certain resources, often relating to water, are held by the state on behalf of the public as a whole. The public trust doctrine correlates with many of the themes identified in the research. By opening up the field of inquiry to the myriad of factors that interact with and co-constitute the legal system, socio-legal approaches to research are able to provide a much more relevant picture of the law and its effects than the traditional doctrinal approach. In this research, the doctrinal analysis carried out before the start of the case study confirmed that a coherent legal argument could be made for the existence of a public trust in respect to the public fishery. But that argument on its own is vulnerable to criticism that it is not how the fishery has been interpreted thus far by the judiciary or legislative, and so is unlikely to receive support. However, when considered in conjunction with the socio-legal research that suggests that those involved in fishing activities already interpret the public fishery in ways consistent with the notion of a public trust, then the argument becomes much stronger. It moves from an argument seeking to change the status of the fishery towards one seeking the acknowledgement of the current overlooked status. The more rounded and relevant results produced by socio-legal research are of clear benefit to legal researchers. However, they can also be of benefit to resilience researchers. Indeed, if law is viewed as part of a continuum of social normativity, then socio-legal approaches to resilience research open up consideration to a wide range of conduct-shaping and thought-directing rules and standards. This allows researchers to understand the legal system and its role, both actual and potential, in the social ecological systems that are under focus. Increased adoption of socio-legal approaches by non-legal researchers would also have the added benefit of widening the audience for legal research beyond the discipline of law, an important step in enabling the discussions required regarding the choices that need to be made in adopting law and policy that moves us towards resilience, as discussed earlier in the context of flooding. Clarvis, Allen and Hannah argue that research is needed to identify key measurable legal and institutional features that might promote resilient water governance and management in the face of climate change. This presentation has suggested that one route to achieving this aim is by resilience researchers adopting socio-legal approaches to research. This would also help to bring together social, scientific and legal researchers with a common aim, and thus to chip away at the institutional cultures of law and science, helping each to understand the other and work together to address the uncertainty and complexity thrown up by social ecological systems and needed in order to manage such systems sustainably.